This is the fun of life. Welcome, everybody. We are here on Facebook and also recording for the College Parents Central podcast. For those of you who are watching us on Facebook, we have prepared questions for our guests today. If time allows, we will try to take your questions, but you can always ask these gentlemen your questions yourself, and we will have them be sure to let you know how to get in touch with them. So.
And for those of you who are listening to the podcast on the College Parents Central podcast, welcome. This is the second of our crossover events with Elizabeth Hamblet's LD Advisory Facebook page. And we're very excited because we have a lot to talk about today. So I'm going to let Elizabeth, because we are not here alone, I'm going to let Elizabeth introduce our guests for today.
Well, I'm so excited about this episode. So I had the pleasure of meeting our guests today, Tim Fields and Shereem Herndon-Brown at the NACAC conference in September. And I am now the proud owner of two different editions of the Black Family's Guide to College Admissions, which is a wonderful read. And that is what we are here to talk about today. So I'm going to start by asking our guests to introduce themselves, tell y'all a little bit about themselves. And I like to go in clockwise order because I'm just very rigid in my thinking. So in my view, I have Shereem here. So Shereem, just introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are and what you're all about.
Elizabeth, Shereem would always go first. So just count on that.
I had not realized there was a hierarchy. Okay.
Happy day to all. I am Shereem Herndon-Brown. I am the founder and chief education officer at Strategic Admissions Advice, which is an educational consulting firm. I'm also the proud co-author of the Black Family's Guide to College Admissions, a conversation about education, parenting, and race. It's an honor to be on your podcast. I have the opportunity to speak to your audience about a variety of college admissions related stuff. So thank you again for having us.
And I am Timothy Fields, Senior Associate Dean of Undergraduate Admission at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Also had the great privilege of co-authoring this book with Shereem. And as you were on our podcast, Elizabeth, a couple of weeks ago, it is out in the world. If you have not heard it, please go and check it out on all podcasts. We were excited to have that conversation with you. And so we're excited to be here with you and Vicki to talk about our book and all things college admission today.
Well, I'm really excited to be able to share this with everybody. So I have, as I said, read both books cover to cover. I was just blown away by the first one. There's so much important information in there. And what we'll get to today for folks who are just joining us that I think is really interesting is obviously it's the Black Family's Guide to College Admissions. There's a lot of very good specific information for Black families, but also for everybody. So, but it's been it's 4 years. I can count 4 years since the publication of your first book. And in reading this new one, I saw that there were 3 additional chapters that you added. So the chapter called Affirmative Action is Dead is pretty obviously explained by the Supreme Court decision. So not to give too much away because we want everybody to read the book, but do you want to give folks who are listening and watching a sense of, the flavor of what they will learn in that chapter because it's so important?
Sure. And just for a little bit of clarity, Elizabeth, and again, you are now a understanding the choices historian, and understanding the choices, the umbrella company that Tim and I have. We started the book in 2020. We published it in September 2022.
Sorry.
Very all good. But I think the Supreme Court affirmative action is dead chapter is an extension of after we published the first book in 2022 September. Very quickly, less than a year later, the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action was going to be released, and we knew that was pending. So we approached our publisher, Johns Hopkins University Press, about adding 3 chapters. The first one about the affirmative action piece, which I'll respond to in a second. Essays is a big piece of the puzzle that we wanted to make sure that we went a little more in depthly about, given that there were a lot of questions about it, particularly as it relates to the Supreme Court decision. And we had heard on the road about mental health and how so many parents and educators were concerned about the mental health of students going through this process, that Tim took the lead on an excellent chapter about mental health. So again, thank you for referencing the fact that our book, albeit titled The Black Family's Guide to College Admissions, whether it's mental health, that applies to anyone applicable, whether it's essays and artificial intelligence, that's applicable to anyone. We have an expectation for timeline success that's applicable to anyone. So we're really glad that 2/3 of our book is for anyone who's concerned about college admissions. But affirmative action in higher education, the reason why I'm going to respond to this and not Tim is because obviously Tim is the Senior Associate Dean of Admission at Emory. Emory is an institution that will abide by the Supreme Court decision to eliminate race-conscious admission. It's complicated. I'm a child of affirmative action. I went to Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. I also went to Middlebury College for graduate school. And I know you guys are New England folks, so you know where those places are. But I am a product of affirmative action. I'm not sure I'd get into those schools without those institutions being committed to being welcoming, inviting places for families of color. All that said, with the Supreme Court eliminating that as per the decision last June, I'm disappointed. And I need families to understand this, Black and other hues, that we are entering a new time in college admissions where race is no longer considered. So no matter how you think of it, good, not so good, or impartial, it's changed. So we wanted to highlight that with a very provocative title, and we've done that, but also let people know that things done changed in this landscape of college admission.
Yeah. Tim, did you want to?
Yeah, and the only thing that I'll add is that we also wanted to give a historical overview. That a lot of times people, just take quick clips that they hear on CNN, Fox News, CBS, NBC, wherever you may, digest your information. And we wanted to, say, how did we arrive at this place? So we kind of go through the cases that led up to the decision to provide some context. And I think that's one of the larger things that we wanted to do in our book, is provide some context for a lot of the topics that we discover, that we talk about and dive into. And so that was one of how we wanted to begin the second book, given it its importance and it's how it's front in mind for so many.
So I know, Shereem, you said that you had the essay, I think if I understood you correctly, you sort of had the essay chapter in mind when you wrote the first edition. Did I misunderstand?
No. We highlighted, we touch on it in the first edition as part of our book is broken up into 3 parts. Context, Tim just explained that in terms of, a variety of the things that kind of go into that. X factors, which is really an admissions-led process. Tim gives an overview of how college admissions is done and some of the X factors that are involved. And I took the lead on the process and what needs to happen at what juncture in order. So all that said, essays are, dare I say, my specialty. I have a master's, a bachelor's in English, and I have a master's in English from Middlebury's Burnlow School of English. So I love the essay component. I love the brainstorming. So we definitely talked about it in the first edition, but given the Supreme Court decision, given that we're getting so many questions about it on the road, I wanted to bulk it up a little bit, enrich it, but then introduce artificial intelligence, right? So November 2023, AI, ChatGPT, becomes part of our lexicon. And we need to talk about how that is now related to college admissions essays. So knowing that there is now more to tell and people were asking for it, we added an additional chapter that really focuses on called The Power of Writing, is I think the official title about college essays.
Tim, did you want to add to, I mean, I got the impression too that it maybe felt even more imperative to talk about the essay given. So could you also explain a little bit about understanding that now colleges in some places will not consider race, how students can work with that essay? I am seeing a lot of posts about ways for students to talk in their essays about their experiences. So is there anything that you would want to share, Tim?
Yeah, so I think, been at Emory for almost 20 years. And, one of the things, really like to, highlight is, students have, talked about all kinds of things in essays. They talked about their identity. They talked about their childhood. They talked about, their exploits in band and in sports. And, students talk about a lot of things. And so I think, we've always wanted students, especially at the more selective schools, to, really like tell your story. How are you going to differentiate yourself from other people? And so with this decision, it really just opened up the door to really, really have to double down on that. and that you don't want to talk about your lived experience, whatever that is. We're not saying that students need to talk about their race, their identity, if they don't want to talk about it. However, it is part of their lived experience, and if that's something that's important to you, I think it's something that we wanted students to talk about.
Shereem, I think it was I have a quote. I think you said this specifically. Maybe you wrote it together, but I loved this. You're writing a short story that documents a slice of your life. You are its protagonist, and you're going to shine by drawing the reader with imagery and details. Now, as a fellow English major,
That was good. That is good. As you say that, I'm going to take full credit for that. No, we didn't write that together. That's all me. That's all me.
Okay. Like written like somebody with a master's from Breadlove.
I do what I do, Elizabeth. I do what I do.
I love it.
But I will say that, no, I do think that too often we put so much emphasis on this personal statement essay that, again, it is critical. Trust.
Sure.
But as per the Common Application, it's 650 words, and it's not supposed to be an autobiography from birth or elementary school until you're a senior in high school. So all that said, a slice of your life, you get to be the protagonist, meaning they want to learn about you. I know about Luke Skywalker. I know about, Indiana Jones. Those are the protagonists, right? Of those movies, of those stories. I know about Harry Potter. This is your story. This is not a book report. And if it's your book, give me a slice, not, ages 3, 7, 12, but I want to hear between 15 and 17, 14 maybe, how you've evolved. I love the book by Michelle Obama, Becoming. It doesn't say you became, it's about evolution. How are you growing? What are you learning? So a slice of that, it's not going to be all the lessons learned. It needs to be something that's unique to you. And, Tim likes it when I say this, so I'll make sure I drop it. It's like a snowflake. We're all different. There's no two snowflakes alike. So give me that one drop that you think, that one flake that you think could be unique about you, and expound upon it in a way that a college can learn more about you in ways that they can't from your numbers or recommendations.
And Shereem, if you don't mind, I know we often talk about that this isn't new. So this idea that a lot of people feel like all of a sudden, oh, I have to talk about race, ethnicity as if it hasn't happened before. So I know you have a couple of great examples that you give of how students have been doing this for years.
Yeah. So primarily most of my clients in our company that we get strategic admissions advice are from affluent New England, Mid-Atlantic, independent schools, boarding schools, suburban schools. And trust me, those kids at those schools are finding what makes them unique. And, what Tim is referring to is that there have been students, plural, who've written about their cultures, their lived experiences of going into a synagogue, and feeling a certain way, or, being intellectually challenged about why they're sitting in a separate part as a young woman from her brothers and father during the high holidays. Sure. And another story comes to mind is an Indian family who, again, without saying we are an Indian, I am an Indian family from Southeast Asia. It's more about, culturally, there are generations in this home. I get to learn the traditions of my ancestors because my grandmother lives with us and makes sure she pours into us. So all that said, that's a lived experience. That's cultural. That's racial. That's religious. Whatever you want to call it. It allows them to be different. So we're not saying students write about being black, black, black. We're saying write about your life, life, life.
And Tim, I mean, you guys have been at Emory through an admissions cycle since the Supreme Court decision. Have you seen some students do this very effectively?
I mean, honestly, the essays haven't changed. Essentially, if I have to reflect upon other years, students are, writing about the same things that they want to write about. But I would say that students too often write about the same things. They want to regurgitate their activities. So I play a sport, so I want to write about the sport. I have a job, so I want to write about what I learned on these jobs. And these are excellent topics to write about if that's what you're comfortable in writing. But I think what happens in these hyper selective schools that have admit rates below 10%, you have to find a way to differentiate yourself. I often say that you are not, if you apply to a place like Emory, the Ivy League, Stanford, Rice, WashU, you are not going to be the best at anything if you write about like more than likely you're not going to be the best at anything given the selectivity of that pool, but you can be the best at being you. So present who you are And that's going to make you stand out in this process.
That sounds so cruel when you say it. You're not the best at anything, but
It's just the truth.
But he does.
It's
He
the
follows
truth.
up with "You're the best at being you," and that's undeniable,
I
right?
mean, okay, at those selective institutions, let me stop.
Well,
All good.
I mean,
Shereem, I'll ask you this: of all the clients you worked with through the years, were any of them that you think were the best if they applied to a selective school? That you said, this is the best person at this if they apply to this type of school?
No, I think the word you use is pointy. I've worked with kids who've been, I think, the best at whatever they're pointy at, which again, which makes them uniquely you. So touche, you win. Carry on.
this is part of the experience of talking with these guys.
Yes, welcome, Vicki. Welcome to the circus, Vicki. Welcome.
All right. I want to pivot a little bit.
Yes.
I mean, I have to say I'm an English major as well. And so I could listen to, the conversation about essays and writing essays all day long. And that's great. But it's related because you're talking about, you are the best at being you. And what I wanted to ask a little bit about, you in your book, you encourage that the college process has to start early. Even in the choice of elementary school for some families and those things. And you have to be thinking about that. And I'm curious if you have thoughts about how you find that balance between being on that right path and building toward that process all along, but not having it become the student's life. If they're going to work at being who they are, how does it not all become about preparing for college and I'm doing this to get in, I'm doing that to get in? How do you find that balance?
So I'll start. And Tim, please clean this up if need be. It's more about closing the information gap. So we're not encouraging families to, at 8 years old, have a set of colleges to consider and then direct your kids' activities towards that. I do think it's important that we all level the playing field of having the same kinds of information and, dare I say, access to information that can then help families to make decisions about their elementary school kids, then go to this middle school, could be a neighborhood or not, and understand that the resources of that neighborhood is going to expose them to a variety of colleges given by the parent body, given what the school's committed to. It's all about exposure and information. So yeah, I understand when we say start early, having the conversation about what does your educational life look like, parent, because the kid can't make that decision. What is the ideal that you'd like them to get? And it's not about a sweatshirt at the end of the rainbow, as a freshman in college, but what kind of learning do you want them to have so that they have opportunities, plural, at a variety of options as they get older? Tim?
And I think the main point that we wanted to do is that, if you have aspirations to go to certain types of schools, you can't just pop up junior year and say, this is where I want to go. More than likely, the course sequencing to take the courses you need to get into those type of schools
To be competitive, to be considered.
To be competitive, to be considered, the foundation of that probably happened in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And so too often, what our book was born out of were friends calling us and when their children were in the second semester junior year, first semester senior year, say, hey, my son or daughter is thinking about applying to school, we need some help. And to my response is, well, if you're trying to apply to Duke, all I can say is get the application in on time and proofread, because what really needed to happen in order to be competitive, the train is gone. And so we just wanted, people to know that, if you are looking as you go about this process, it just can't start when the formal application process begins, when you start to fill out the application. The foundation is set long before that. And to Shereem's point, we just wanted to provide information and exposure to the process. And when he says narrow the information gap, I think one of the driving forces in our writing was that only a third, 33% of Black students receive information about the college going process within their household. versus over 66% of white families who receive information. And so how families are receiving information, how they're beginning this process, what information they're having to navigate this process is different. And so we just wanted to provide a resource to help navigate those conversations. And honestly, we wanted to, push the button a little bit, like we have to begin this process a little bit earlier.
Mhm.
Sure.
So I'd like to follow that up a little bit, but I'm going to take you a little off guard maybe because this isn't something we asked you to think about ahead of time.
Vicky. Okay, Vicky. Now you're going off script. Going off script.
I just sat back and let you all talk about the essay now.
She couldn't help herself.
Because I did have another question, but I think you've really addressed that question. But this is related. Right at the outset of your book, it's right there on the first page of the preface of your book that you talk about redefining success. And you say, this is our mantra: redefine success in the college admissions process. And I think that's really what you're talking about in a way when you're talking about starting early and having those family conversations and building towards something. Can you just talk a little bit about what you mean by redefine success? And you encourage parents to help their child do that. So how do, we're talking to parents, how can they do that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. And similar to our podcast, there's all kind of freestyling going on. Like we draw it up, and then all of a sudden the question bubbles up. So absolutely, thank you for that. I think when redefining success, I think too often there is this belief that there is a certain type of school that my child can be successful at, that they need to go to a certain type of high school in order to be competitive. That there's a certain type of job that is waiting at the end of my child's career that would define them to be successful. However, when we step back from these assumptions and look at the world as it is, there are a lot of people who are very, very successful who did not attend Ivy League institutions. There are a lot of people who go on to be successful who went to public schools. There are people who do not work at Fortune 500 companies who are entrepreneurs like Shereem who are doing great things. And so what we wanted families to say is think about is like you define success on your terms in your home. That might just be you're a first generation college student just going to college, local state college, university. That is success. That is a big deal. And so we wanted to, kind of, really, hone in on that. Also, we highlight historically Black colleges and universities. I'm a graduate of Morehouse. And too often there's this belief that historically Black college universities are less than predominantly white institutions. However, you have Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first, woman of color, Black, Southeastern Asian, lady who is the Vice President of the United States, who went to Howard University. You have Oprah Winfrey, who's one of the richest people in the world, who went to Tennessee State. And then, we often, as we go around the country, ask, parents and counselors do an exercise, look at the last 10 people that you called in your phone. And if they went to college, more than likely, you would deem those people to be successful. And so we want people to remove this idea that I need to go to Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Howard, Spelman, Morehouse in order to be successful. 4,000 colleges and universities in the country, 2,000 offer bachelor's degrees. We just cannot have a hyper focus on 75 of them to say that if my child does not go to these institutions, that they're going to be successful. And so that is what we're really trying to get families to rethink, and then also define success based upon the walls of your home. I go off on a tangent, in the book about misinformation, which is one of my big pet peeves, that everybody listen to what everybody else is doing, and they're determining success based upon what they see other people are doing, when honestly, that is not the path towards success in our eyes.
Vicki,
can I follow?
Please.
And then I promise I'll let you go back to what you want to talk about. Because I just want to follow that up with one little thing. Do you have any suggestions on how parents can fight the messaging that students are getting that's contrary to what you're saying. That you have to go to these certain places. This is the goal.
Mm.
And I think we're doing that. We are, the messaging is we are using this book, using talking to you, our speaking tour we're from a megaphone say, please, things have changed. You don't have to do this anymore. Open your lens. So we're trying. So the suggestion we have is for parents to listen to this, conversation that we're having. But again, I think Tim's example of if every parent looked into their phone to see of the last 10 people they spoke to, where they went to college, and do they deem them successful, I bet they're willing to do. We also, in our book, at least for Black college graduates, list out famous, successful, whatever you want to call it, Black Americans and where they went to college. Again, he mentioned Oprah Winfrey going to Tennessee State. We as adults need to help our kids, again, so that their kids are getting messaging from New York Times, whether they're reading or not, they're seeing the headlines, Dartmouth, Yale. Bless those institutions, but they're not talking about Albertus Magnus and Fairfield, and maybe that's in that state. That's where they need to be going. So all that said, we want to use platforms like yours for people just to have conversations about changing their lens, having a college list that is, I guess, something that is really just deemable, if that's even a word, given the changing higher education landscape, but also understanding that there's plenty of people didn't go to X, Y, and Z school. So using social media for good, hopefully.
Such an important message. Thank you.
But if you have suggestions, Vicki, on how we can, weave that into telepathically tell parents that, let us know, we're all in.
I mean, recently we've even, we were at South by Southwest a couple weeks ago, and we, talked about the few names that I mentioned, but we also asked everybody, raise your hand, do you have an iPhone? And 90% of the people raised their hand. And we're like, Tim Cook went to Auburn, and Auburn is known for football. So there are people
Steve Jobs went to Reed.
So we want people to, really open up their mind beyond and say what is really happening, and not just paying attention to the narrative that often is taking place. That really isn't a really good depiction of the reality that is happening.
So we'll all just try to be on the same message.
And I think, it's probably, 10 years old already, but Frank Bruni's Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be, I'm probably not, is a great book for, demonstrating exactly what Tim is talking about. It's so much of going to college is about what you do when you're there. And I was just listening to Lisa D'Amour on Rick and Brennan's podcast talking about when she was teaching at University of Michigan, and like 200 people were on a waiting list to work in the psych lab or something. And then she was working at a smaller school in Ohio, and these students were getting great access to the lab because it was a smaller place. And, so it's not just about where you go, but what you do while you're there. But I was thinking, gentlemen, so just a reminder for those who are listening or just joining us on Facebook, we are here with Shereem Herndon-Brown and Tim Fields, who are the authors of The Black Family's Guide to College Admissions. Thank you. Yep, wait, I got mine. Let's do this again. Sorry for those who are listening, but
look at you. Oh, all right, here we go.
We need a screenshot of that. So we're all holding up our books. Back to, the choices because yours is understanding the choices. You guys both went to different kinds of institutions. Shereem went to a predominantly white institution, a PWI as we call it now, and Timothy, you went to Morehouse.
Yes, Morehouse.
And so, for families who want their kids to consider these options, but maybe don't have their own experience at either kind of school, are there any starting points that you suggest that they use for, trying to talk to their kids about what each kind of environment could offer them?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I think it's important that all families have conversations early. And when I say early, Tim makes a great point about, information coming into certain families at certain times, certain households. But as in terms of the dynamics of HBCUs and PWIs or predominantly white institutions, it's more about having an open mind, like we're going to start there, but
Mhm.
understanding that whatever worked for you 20, 30 years ago is going to be different for your kid.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tim tells a great story of, there are three camps of, Black families. There are the families that say, we're going to consider historically Black colleges and universities as well as predominantly white institutions. They're fairly saying that we believe that predominantly white institutions are, better because they're more better reflection of the world. It's a diverse world. It's not all Black, so you should go to a PWI. And there's families who went to historically Black college and university, be like, this was an amazing experience. This is my family legacy there. This is where I'm going. That's where my money's going. That's where my kids going. End of discussion. So the last two are the ones who are actually the loudest, where overwhelmingly most families consider both.
Mm-hmm.
What does your kid need and why? Tim tells another good story. I'm giving you a lot of credit today. This isn't being recorded, is it? He talks about the why.
Nope, no recording, no worries.
But it's about the why. Why do you want this school for your kid? Why do you think this is best? Why? And again, it could be because I want them to, work at JP Morgan one day, or I want them to be an educator. But whatever it is, you got to know your why. Ultimately, we are firm believers that there's something for everyone. There's 4,000 college universities out there, 2,000 of them offers bachelor's degrees. Let's not get caught up into name brand recognition, albeit Wesleyan, Middlebury, Morehouse, we're no slouches here. And people have called us to the carpet on that. That sounds comes from a very privileged standpoint. I don't say privileged, I say fortunate. I was fortunate. I'm a first generation college student. I was fortunate to go to an independent school, Westtown School. I was fortunate to go to Brooklyn Friends School. I was fortunate to go to Wesleyan. I was fortunate to go to Middlebury. All those things happened because my parents had a plan or I fell into place with DEI. But all that said, I hope that families will think about what's important for their child at this juncture in their life and not be singularly minded on what they believe it used to be. That may have been repetitive, but I hope I got to a point.
Yeah. And just like trying to give a crystal example, and part of I think one of the great things about Shereem and I working together is we're living this. We are parents, so we're just not talking about, oh, we worked in higher education for the last. No, like we are living this, and so my wife went to the University of Miami, so her college experience is different than mine, and she enjoyed her college experience. But one of the things that she constantly calls me to the carpet is, yes, you went to Morehouse, and I'm sure you would love our 11-year-old son to go to Morehouse, but does he want to go to college with all males? Does he want to go to college 15 minutes away from where he was raised?
Right.
Whereas you left Texas to go to college. Maybe he wants to have the experience similar to I had as far as being at a D1 school that has, rah sports that, is something that can be part of his experience. Like, what are his needs? And so what, can happen is I let my ego say, I want my son to go to Morehouse because I went to Morehouse, but that not fit his needs drive this process. And so I think it's really important for parents to step back and, we talked with a college psychiatrist, Dr. Bianca Bush, and she says most decision is going to be a compromise. The parents aren't going to get everything they want. The student is not going to get everything they want. You're going to meet someplace in the middle. And so it's just important to have conversations about the needs. And then, Shereem, the important 4 pillars that have to be discussed.
Cost. Number one, we don't want people going broke. Money matters in America. We're a capitalistic society, and we do not believe that going into excessive amounts of debt, students and parents, needs to be how you navigate this process. Loan's not a bad word, but parent plus loans plus is compounding interest. And we don't think that families need to just say, just go to college and you can make this back. It doesn't quite work this way. So you need to make sure, always consider cost as number one. Number two, location. I do think it's important that families consider location. Where's this kid going to have access to whatever they need, whether it's farmland because they're into agriculture, or it's into a major metropolitan area because they're going to have access to possibly finance internships if that's what their aspirations are. Or I work with a student who wants to be a curator at a museum, so she wants to come to Washington, D.C. and have opportunities to intern at all the Smithsonian's down here. So cost, location, possible major. I do believe in applying to college with intentionality. I think that too often, again, and I went to Wesleyan, I get it's a liberal arts institution, but I think that we have to help our kids to identify their strengths and interests and think about the majors as they're going in, understanding that they may change. But I could have told you when I was 15 years old, I wasn't going to be a chem major. I could have told you You know what I mean? Like, that's not my thing. So if we
Yeah.
look at our kids, no matter what we want them to be, I'm a parent of a 28-year-old and a 19-year-old. I've had to look at them and be like, that's not what I was thinking of, but I still love you. But the bottom line is we need to help our kids to have apply to college with intentionality. So that's possible major. So cost, location, possible major, and then possible career. Again, we don't know what career is going to be available in 5, 10 years,
Oh my
but we
gosh.
do want to be thinking about it. Again, I'm a big believer if we just kind of throw caution to the wind and throw snowballs on the wall to see what sticks, you're going to just get what life gives you. I would rather we make an attempt for something, have ambitions and aspirations, and then pivot when necessary. But let's not go into this blindly thinking that going to college is the holy grail for being successful in America.
So I'm really grateful to hear you talk so much about communication and talking to your student and figuring that out, because that really answers what was in my mind, which was what if parents have differing opinions of what they think their child should do, and you really hone in on, well, it's knowing your kid and knowing what they want to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
But
we talk about communication a lot,
Yeah.
so that's really important.
Yeah, and it's important again, and Tim said it, we're living this, right? Like I said, I have a
Yeah.
19-year-old son, my only son. I have 3 daughters, 1 son. I love my kid to the ends of the earth. But I've learned that when he and I don't communicate effectively, somebody's going to get very, very angry.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you know who that is. So, in order to navigate this process more efficiently, even the college counselor guy who's got it all figured out for everybody else has to understand that my kid is who he is, and I am helping him figure a lot of things, as I did my older daughter. Had to help her figure out a lot of things that were challenging at times, but I'm proud of both of them. I'm proud of the work that Tim and I are doing. I'm proud that Vicki, you co-sign on what we're saying, that if we don't communicate, if you parents who are listening don't communicate with your kids about what you think they're good at, what they think they're good at, you're just gonna pull each other apart. Let's work to this. And I love, thank you, Elizabeth, for mentioning Brendan and Rick's book, The Truth About College Admissions for Families. Brendan and I go back 30 years. He and I went to high school together. Rick and Tim obviously work in Atlanta together. They are our we call them our label mates for Johns Hopkins University Press. So if you don't have their book, Rick Clark, Brendan Barnard, please cop it. But we are big believers as a foursome, but that we have to have communication in our families to discuss this process, because it's so expensive, because it is important, and because we now have the resources and the information to do it. Why wouldn't we?
And we would be remiss if we did not just mention like how much this process has changed and how important it is to communicate as a family throughout this process. Because Shereem and I, as we're traveling and talking with different families, there are a lot of families who are assuming the process has not changed, and they're following this playbook of, oh, my child has this SAT score, this GPA, they're automatically going to get into these highly selective schools. And they're feeling a lot of pain because, they assumed, oh, and then all of a sudden they're getting blanketed and they don't have the options that they wanted just because they did not realize that this process has changed so much. And then the parents are leading it based upon the idea, I want to at graduation say we have this sweatshirt, this is where my child is going to go, and that's not happening. And so we just really need families to keep an open mind in this process and understand how much has changed. The place that you were admitted to 25, 30 years ago, more than likely your child may not have a chance of getting there for any number of reasons.
Sounds so discouraging, Tim. Mr. Doom and Gloom today.
Well,
Sounds like an admissions officer from a selective institution. That's just him kind of putting out there, putting out there.
You got a couple stories to tell. Go ahead and
Well-
tell a couple stories if you want.
I mean, I myself and Lisa DeWard just said this in Rick and Brennan's podcast. A lot of people our age are, start these conversations by saying, I went to such and such, but I couldn't get back in, I couldn't do it now.
Well said.
And what I think is important too, and one of the things that I really liked about this book, and this is where, again, this is the Black Family's Guide to Admissions, but there's so much good information here for all students. You guys talk about transfer because, I think one of the things that makes this decision so hard is the feeling young people have like, this is the decision I make that sets my life on course, right? And it's all on me. I have to figure out the right place for me that's going to get my life going. And I'm going to be able to do X, Y, and Z for the rest of my life because I went to, ABC place. And so, you know, it's you can't know what it's like until you get there, right? You can't really know what the experience is until you're, and in many cases you're living there, you're interacting with people. And so I really appreciated the statement, life is not linear, because never truer words were spoken.
I'll let you think about who wrote that. You decide who wrote that. You decide who wrote that.
Hey, like I said, you got some stories. Go ahead and story time, Shereem.
No,
Story time.
it's not story time. This is not our podcast, sir.
It is your podcast. You're the
We are the
guest.
guests. We are the humble
Go
guests.
for
No,
it.
it's a big deal to us because, again, life is not linear. That's easy. But again, we ask people all the time, where did Barack Obama start college?
Oh my
Harvard,
gosh, right?
Columbia. And I'm like,
Mhm.
not so much. Occidental, right? So even the former president of the United States went from Occidental to Columbia, then obviously went to Harvard Law. All that said, it's important that where you start doesn't mean when you finish. And it's not a bad thing. I don't meet my wife I went to college, Wesleyan University, with a gentleman who ended up transferring to Howard. He and I were there for first freshman, sophomore year. He transfers to Howard. I go visit him. I meet my wife 25 years later, ta-da. Like that's a big deal to me. That's a transfer process winning. One of my best friends is a president of a big company out there in terms of media. He went to UPenn first 2 years of college and then transferred to Wesleyan. So again, people say, "Oh my God, how could you leave an Ivy League school?" He's like, "I wasn't happy. I wanted to go to Wesleyan. My parents made me go to Penn when I got in. I wanted to go to Wesleyan once upon a time." He went to Wesleyan and has done very, very well for himself. All that said, we are believers. We have learned experiences. We have examples of the transfer process being a great opportunity for people to kind of get their feet wet in college, where that may mean community college, right? Again, let's go back to cost. Transferring to a major 4-year university and then getting a degree. Most people don't kind of say, I started here and finished there. No. Aaron Rodgers is, quarterback and of the New York Jets. I'm a Jets fan. Sorry, I interjected. He went to a community college first and then went to University of Cal Berkeley. Cam Newton went to transfer college before going to Auburn. I'm assuming community college. So uh, it is just part of growing up. The tender years of 18 to 22, a lot happens. Family growth, independence, blah, blah, blah. So we don't want students to think that where you go from 17 to 18 is going to define you. But we also want you to understand that give yourself time to grow and learn and figure some things out. Hopefully with the support of your parent, like Vicki said, communication. And we all need to take our egos out of that. Tim, you want to talk about parents and their egos in this process?
I have.
Okay, you said enough. You said enough.
Yeah,
I always make sure you had to say. I want to make sure you say what you need to say.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I really want you to talk about the story about transferring, but we'll say that for another day.
We will. Thank you. I'm having a good day.
Okay, so since we're saving that for another day, I want to think a little more about parents. And you talk in your book about parents need to be the driver of this process, and especially if you're starting those conversations and the thinking and the information gathering early, parents need to be drivers. And I remember, I have 3 daughters. I remember trying to teach my kids how to drive, literally drive the car. And it was terrifying.
Indeed.
And I remember the most terrifying moment was that moment when they got behind the wheel and I had to go around the car and get in the passenger seat. And they were in charge. So my question is, in talking about parents as drivers of the process, when in the process, or is it true in the process, that parents need to turn the wheel over to students to be the drivers?
I'll say this. So the driver process actually comes from Jeff Salingo's book, Who Gets In and Why. So I'm going to give Jeff all the credit for that. He's been a great friend of ours. And I think it's a unique metaphor for understand how this college process in 2020, whatever, needs to work, particularly selective college admissions. It's your money, parents. Let's be clear, cost. So if you're not driving, you think that you're just going to turn over $75 grand a year to your kid and say, you make the decision based on where you want to go because I have this money to give to you, then you're better than I am. So I want families to be driving because I said cost should be the lead conversation in terms of the search process. I also think that it depends on your kid. Can your kid drive at this time? If your kid's not ready, just because they're 16, they should get a license. That doesn't mean I'm giving you the keys to my car to go out at night. Just, you know what I mean? Like, just because you're 18, that doesn't mean you get to make adult decisions about where you go. We need to communicate. So I think parents driving, and maybe we should change it to, we split the time driving. Like, you drive for 70, I drive for, 70%, you drive for 30%. But parents need to understand that knowing their kid, using their worldly experiences, having access to information, kids are only going to digest what they want to digest about the college process from social media, from friends, from what they hear. We need to be the discerning adults here and help them to start the car, drive it down the road. And at some point, as we get more comfortable with them becoming more comfortable, we can turn the keys over to them for a portion of it. But I think if we take our hands off the steering wheel, we have kids going all to the wrong places for the wrong reasons.
Okay.
Was that enough? I'm sorry, Vicki.
That was enough. Yeah, it was.
Okay.
It was.
Okay.
It's a scary transition.
It is. It is.
And we don't, they don't get that learner's permit and we hand them the keys.
Right.
They get the learner's permit and I may move around to the passenger side, but I'm still there. And, my kids are a lot older now and I'm still backseat driving sometimes. And,
Absolutely.
all of that. And white knuckling it sometimes. So I think the reality is that driver and passenger thing can be uncomfortable at times in both ways. And if we know that and anticipate that, that's going to help a lot.
Well said.
I'd like to take an opportunity to return to the statement about fake admissions news, because I think, in the rumor mill, admissions fake news. Because I think there are a lot of folks out there who hear things from each other and just assume that it is the truth. Like, you guys talk about parents saying, well, my student got into such and such college because they blah, blah, blah. And, what are some of the kinds of things that you think parents should be aware of that when they hear it is fake admissions news?
Yeah, I think the first thing, anybody going through this process should get their information from a credible source. And by credible, being their college counselor or school counselor at their school, calling a college or university that they're interested in and getting information from there. If they're fortunate enough to be able to, get independent consultant to get information from somebody who is attached to the field in some way. I think, a lot of times if you just are getting information from a parent, recognize that parent is biased and their child in their eyes is the best child in the world, the smartest child in the world, and they did everything to get into that school because of their greatness. But that's not the reality of it. I call it the wine and cheese circuit. That people go around and, oh, my son or daughter got into this school and this is what they scored, this is what they did, and if you follow this play map, then you can get in here too. When that's not the case, because Elizabeth, you said on our podcast, nobody knows what went into that decision. Like nobody outside of that admission office knows what were the factors that caused that student to be admitted. So you have to get credible information. The other thing that I would say about this process as far as getting information, and Shereem, I've already said I'm doom and gloom, is that parents lie. Like parents straight up lie to save face because they want their child to be great. I was talking with a friend and, she was like, yeah, a friend of my daughter got into Emory and she decided to go someplace else. And I was like, huh, really? And she's like, yeah, this is her name. And I went up and that young lady was denied. However, the mother, nobody would ever know. She says, oh, we just decided to go someplace else. But, parents, I think just, there's a other part where you have to take what they say with a grain of salt. That's why I have to say you get information from credible sources that are attached to the process and not just somebody who's been through the process once with one child in which you have no idea of why they got into that college or university.
There's a lot to unpack there.
There is. And you know, I sometimes wonder when I hear, I think we've all heard similar stories. Does mom really know the student got denied? Because
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
sometimes that doesn't, and that goes back to how you set the communication up with your student way back. And if they know that telling you that they got denied is not going to go well, then maybe not. I mean, who knows? Oh, so much to talk about. You know, I think we could stick it out all day. But I don't know if Elizabeth has any questions that have come on Facebook, but I also just wanted to ask whether there's anything you wish we had asked you and that you'd like to make sure you get in before we end.
You know, again, I thank you for asking the redefining success question. That's a big deal for us. We mean it, and we want to really amplify that and allow that to organically grow, and really be the seeds of this process, ideally, you know, idealistically. But thank you for this opportunity. Our book, for those of you who haven't listened all the way through, The Black Family's Guide to College Admissions: A Conversation about Education, Parenting, and Race, written by a Black man who went to a predominantly white institution, independent schools, first generation college student, and works on the admission side, and someone who's a fourth generation college student, who's a senior associate dean of admission at a highly selective institution, Emory University, and a proud HBCU grad. We have different perspectives, different dynamics, but we have a ton of information, and we're proud to share it. And we say 2/3 of this book is for anyone: black, white, green, yellow, purple, orange. But there's parts of it that are selective to Black families that we need to discuss. So again, we hope that whoever picks it up finds it as an amazing resource. You can find us at understandingthechoices.com, Understanding the Choices Instagram, Understanding the Choices Facebook group, because we want families to understand the choices. Boom, boom, boom. So no, we're excited to have this opportunity, and I think we've put together something that people are still learning a lot from, and these next few weeks should be interesting in the admissions process. What do you say, Tim?
Well, I'd say there's an excellent question that was just dropped in the chat, which is
So you don't like
essentially,
so you like my closing? You want to
I don't think you're in a position to close. It's not our podcast.
touche. I apologize. Continue.
How do you recommend families approach getting accommodations they need? Is there anything they need to know specifically in college search or application process? And this is the beginning part about it is about getting access to talented, gifted classes that too often a lot of Black and brown children are saying that they have learning differences or so how can we excessively fight against that? Actually was just having a conversation prior to getting on. I think too often, and this is my opinion, Black families just aren't as assertive as other families in the school. I think there are other families that are very much so that my child needs this. I want my child in these classes. This is what my expect. And whereas a lot of times Black families take more kind of a backseat approach. It's like, okay, if this is what you recommend, we'll go along with this. And I think a theme that we've had throughout is we talked about communication. And you have to communicate with the school, and you have to set expectations as far as what you want. I was just in a conversation a couple of weeks ago with somebody, and the family's like, well, they're not letting my child into AP classes. And I was like, well, if you are going to this school, I think at some point you can say, I want my child in this AP class, and I will take the brunt. If my child doesn't do well, that's on me. But I think they can. And I think too often families, just take what's given to them as opposed to saying, this is what I think is best for my child, and having that conversation and not just taking what's given to them.
Ooh, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot, Tim.
That's
That's a lot. No, but it's important. It's an important piece that, again, I think has many layers to it. that, yes, I do think advocacy is huge, particularly as parents partner with, communicate with student, child, school. Um, and I guess the only thing that, you'll learn this, Tim and I are, I don't say contradictory at times, but we don't share the same opinion. I do think in educational settings, there's very much often a customer service proponent that, if parents, student, school, you work for me, thus you need to do what I say for my kid. And of course, there's going to be pushback from educators. But yes, I think advocacy, good, bullying, bad. But I do understand what you're saying of, we have to understand the school and understand the process, the Black Families Guide to College Admissions, Concept of Education, Parent Rights, and then hopefully have informed conversations with educational institutions to best support our kids. So,
And just before we wrap up, I did want to add, you asked a question, something that, wish we would have, asked or share more about. Talked about me going to Morehouse College, great experience in my life. And, too often when people talk about historically Black college universities, they mention Howard, Morehouse, Spelman, North Carolina A&T, Florida A&M, maybe Hampton, maybe Tuskegee. And when it gets around to 8, 9 historically Black college universities, and then the conversation gets really, light. There are over 100 historically Black college universities, have been around for almost 200 years, have served as the foundation of the Black education, post-secondary education in this country. And I think too often they are overlooked. There's assumption that they're only for Black students. Currently, over 20% of the representation at historically Black college universities is not Black students. So it's something that I would hope that all students, regardless of your race or ethnicity, would consider, because I think they offer a great opportunity for students in education. Furthering this conversation that we've had to kind of redefine success as far as the college admission process. That I think a lot of Black students spend time at predominantly white institutions and often are one of the few at those institutions. Who's to say that a student can't go to historically Black college or university and have a great experience and maybe experience something that is different from what their education is?
So, gentlemen, I know leaving one of you with the last word is an interesting prospect.
It's always Shereem. It's always
no, it's
Shereem.
not today. No, stop.
Well, only because I let
There we
Shereem
go.
start at the
There
beginning.
you
I was going to
go.
ask
Thank
you,
you.
Tim, to leave us off with how should and can people get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Understanding the Choices on all platforms. You can go to our website, understandingthechoices.com. You can follow us on Instagram at Understanding the Choices. We have a Facebook group, Understanding the Choices. And you can reach us on LinkedIn at Understanding the Choices. So on all platforms, it's Understanding the Choices. And the reason for that is because hopefully throughout this conversation, we want to make sure that people have multiple choices. While we're focused on the college choice, in our book, we say college isn't for everybody. So there are opportunities for students to go directly in the workforce, entrepreneurship, there's the military. And so we just want people to be well informed, and so they can do what's best for their child based upon their child's needs. But we're so thankful for this opportunity, to have this great conversation with you all, and we appreciate the invitation.
Well, I know we are both very grateful that you took time to talk to us today, and lots of good information to share with parents. So thank you for taking time to be here.
Shereem, did you
Absolutely.
want to just share
No,
your your,
Batman has spoken. That's Batman, that's Bruce Wayne. I am Alfred. He has spoken. We are done. But no, great opportunity. We thank you. Please, as your guests listen to us, hopefully they found this to be informative, and we'd love to connect.
Oh, somebody in the comments that says they've got your book and love it. So I don't know.
There it is.
Thank you. Thank you.